Kristina. I've known Kristina since she was 10 years old. She's had a very rocky road to her recovery. But what her story really highlights is that recovery is possible despite multiple hospitalizations and what may have seemed hopeless at times.
So I'm Kristina. I'm 17 years old, and my recovery was a little more uneven, to say the least. I was diagnosed with anorexia when I was 10 years old. And, I remember always being really critical of my body when I was little. Like, I never thought that I was fat, but just not thin enough. And that was what I thought for a long time. I was also really competitive. Like, I always had to be the best in school, sports, popularity. And in, the 4th grade, I added thinness and restricting my calories to that list. I began to lose weight, deteriorate, and my parents, they caught it pretty early, and they took me to a doctor, Dr. Ornstein. And that year, I worked with an outpatient team kind of about for a year, and I thought things were getting better. I don't remember that much about the process since I was so young, and I'm not going to mention recovery because we kind of, looking back on it, put a Band-Aid on it at that point. I never really dealt with my underlying issues. In fact, my turning point in getting better when I was 10 was when I convinced everyone that I didn't need to see a therapist anymore, and I would get better. And I guess I thought I did. And so I after about a year, I stopped seeing my outpatient team, kind of said goodbye to all this eating disorder stuff, and we really thought that I was done with it. And really, I did great for 2 or 3 years. Then around the middle of 8th grade, my negative thoughts began creeping back. And it's really funny with eating disorders because they can come back at such strange times. Because on the surface, things were perfect. I had just gotten the lead role in the school play. I was Adelaide in Guys and Dolls. I had so many friends. I was doing really well academically. But also, I was beginning to enter puberty at that time, something that was so scary to me. My friends had all gone through it, and I was kind of the last one, and I was used to being the little one who hadn't, and, things began to change, and I freaked out. Also, my parents were fighting a lot at that point, something which we've worked on in individual therapy and family therapy, and it's gotten much better. But I remember waking up at 4 in the morning, more than once to them, screaming at each other in the room across the hall. And, I never wanted to take sides and hurt either of them, so I just kept quiet about all the fighting. But, I was really hurting, and I remember just crying myself back to sleep. And this happened a few times. So basically, I wanted something that would stop all the changes and chaos in my life, both physically and emotionally. And unfortunately, I was led back to the old comforts of my eating disorder. So this time it began slowly. I would say I would restrict 2 days a week and eat normally the other 5. And then over time, very slowly, restricting became more and more frequent and normal eating less and less. When I restricted, I became numb, and I liked that. But really, I knew that I was spiraling out of control. It was really scary. My friends, they would express their concern, but I just kind of laughed it off. What can you do? You can't put me in a hospital. And my parents said nothing. They were in even more denial than I was. And I remember, the thoughts were so bad at that point. I would look at people walking down the street, and I was convinced that everyone was thinner than me. I also had daily thoughts about what a failure I was, how everything would be better if I lost more weight, and the only time that these thoughts ever went away was at 7 a.m. every day when I would get on the scale and see the number sink lower and lower. But even that, maybe 5 minutes tops I was happy, because then something else would come up, and that's how the cycle goes. So around June of that year, that's when things really went downhill very fast. The play was around the middle of May, so that was over. And that had really been such a huge part of my life and really made me feel, special. Also, my best friend, who I had spent, literally every day with for the past 2 years, we were at each other's houses every day, and she had a boyfriend. She began to withdraw from me, and I was withdrawing from her as well, but it just hurt that she was taking that step also. So at that point, I just really thought the eating disorder was all I had, and I really let it control me. And my parents, finally admitting that something was wrong, scheduled a doctor's appointment for me, and that day I was admitted directly to the hospital. So I spent about 2 weeks in the hospital, and I was kind of in a continual state of shock the entire time. I actually hate hospitals. I'm very afraid of them, and I wanted to get out immediately. So I convinced them, my doctors, to let me do the day to let me be inpatient for 2 weeks, do the day program for a week, and then go to Martha's Vineyard, my best friend, on her annual summer family vacation. However, after the night after I got out of the hospital, and like 2 days before I was supposed to go away, my friend's mom called and said, I really don't feel comfortable taking her. And now I look back on it, and that's totally understandable. I had just gotten out of the hospital, but at the point, it was so devastating to me. So I sat home that entire week with nothing to think about but, how depressed I was, the weight I had gained, and the meal plan I was supposed to be following. I also really realized for the first time that, like Becky said, I missed the hospital. That would become actually a common thread in my recovery. I had felt really safe and happy in the hospital, and I also felt that it was the one place I had permission to eat. So 2 weeks later, I entered high school for the first time. And this large, unfamiliar place also happened to be the biggest Catholic high school in America. We have 3,500 kids in my high school. So I had come from a really fairly small middle school where everyone kind of knew my name and face. And now I felt like nobody knew who I was and nobody cared. I also really missed all the real friendships I had formed in the hospital. I felt like now everyone was just talking about, homework and boys, and I didn't care. I thought, well, you guys don't have anything in common with me, because all I thought about was my eating disorder. So I went to the doctor still about once every week, and every week they threatened the hospital, and things were just going downhill very fast, and in November I was readmitted. And that hospitalization is kind of a blur to me. Basically, I put in nothing, to be honest, and so I got out nothing. I constantly compared myself to the other girls, wondering where I ranked in the thinness competition that I truly believed was going on in everyone's minds. I also, so many things. I mean, they would weigh us at 5:30, and I would usually cry for the next hour and a half thinking about how much work it was going to do to undo this weight gain. I remember a therapist there once telling me that I was a real anorexic, and that just, made my entire week. I was so happy, I remember. So I was there for about 2 months, and then they kind of discharged me, and it was really a surprise when they discharged me. I didn't think that I was being discharged that soon, and they were kind of just okay, go back to high school. And so I guess 3 days later, a week later, I went back to high school, and that's a really hard time. It was January of my freshman year. I hadn't been in school. I'd been in school for maybe 2 months out of the whole year, and people had already formed their circles of friends and everything, and I just felt like I didn't belong anywhere, and I didn't really want to belong anywhere, to tell you the truth. All I thought about was my eating disorder. And a little side note, my parents were also kind of at the end of their ropes. They were so distraught, and it really took a toll on our family. I remember often, almost multiple times a week at night, around dinner time, my parents, crying hysterically, telling me that I was ruining our family, telling me they didn't want me to die, and then trying to force feed me, sometimes all in the same night. It was hard, and so I did reach out, though. I tried out for my school play in high school, and I got cast, actually, in one of the lead roles in High School Musical, which was huge because my school is really big, so freshmen rarely get parts. So that was huge. But unfortunately, I was pulled out a week later because my school didn't want to be responsible if anything happened to me. And at that point, they were already threatening the hospital, and I said, you know what, I really can't do this anymore.